This is the
legs. Quarterback's legs.
Fakes left, now taken off. Gonna run for it, he got it! And there he goes! Inside the 10, the 5. Oh, the play of the year in the NFL! Quarterback legs it was.
I said no spy on this play. I can't believe it. The rare mistake by Kansas City. There's times.
Hey guys, Eric Smith here, 5 Reasons sports contributor, also co-host on Scouting the Fins. You can find that one on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel and also the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed. I have also started co-hosting Focused on Fins, and you can find that on my YouTube channel. And that's somewhat new. I've been hosting that with Anthony Testino on a weekly basis. We try to go live Wednesday mornings around 9 o'clock. And this is probably going to sound a little crazy as we talk about my grades for the Dolphins offensive line this week, especially coming from an offensive line guy. But this was a good, not great performance for the Dolphins front 5. We'll get into the details about it, but first I want to take a trip down memory lane and look at the grades from the Week 4 matchup against the Jets. And as you can see, this was not a good performance by the Dolphins offensive line, a 2.48 overall. Patrick Paul had a bit of a rough day. Jonah actually had one of his better early season performances, based on what he did. Aaron Brewer was his consistent self. Cole Strange, very low grade, also the first game that he was in the lineup. And then Larry Borom came in with a 0.00. This would have been the third game that he was playing in this lineup. And this was something I talked about a little bit heading into this game. A bit of a measuring stick for this team is to be able to look back and see how they performed versus divisional opponents in those first matchups and how they did during the rematch. So that's what we're going to get into next. As we get into this week's game against the Jets, the offensive line came at an overall grade of 5.31. You can see that's a lot better than what it was that first time they played the Jets. But if you look at this run that started back at the Falcons game, it's kind of one of their lower graded games during that stretch. And we've talked about in the past that for the overall grade, it's just an average of the 5 starters and what their grade comes in at. And in this game, part of the reason it didn't grade higher was that there just wasn't anybody that was near that 10.0 grade. And we did have one player that was, fairly low in the grading. So when you have that kind of shifting down from what we had in the previous weeks, then, you're going to have more of an average grade. Not taking anything away from the performance this week. There's just a lot of little stuff that still needs to continue to be cleaned up as we move forward. But this is kind of a case in point as to why this outside zone scheme is so successful. And that's that, you can have plays where 1 or 2 players, you can't just get beat cleanly and be getting a 0 grade. But if you have, 3, 4 guys that are grading satisfactory and one that gets a 0.5 grade, chances are you're still going to get a good result out of that run. And that's a lot of what we had this week is that, a lot of these runs were very close to being perfect. And that, that's kind of why we didn't have too many breakaway runs this week. We didn't see the running backs doing the heroic things. We just kind of saw consistent, able to move the ball, very few negative runs, picking up, the 10, 15-yard chunk plays over and over again. So again, good performance by the line, not great, still a lot of room to improve, and we're going to get into those individual performances next. So as usual, we're going to work our way from the lowest graded player all the way up to the highest graded player. A average grade is a 5.00. And the lowest graded player that we had this week was left guard Jonah Savaiinaea. And you can see that he came in a little bit below his season average, which has not been good. 2.23 for this week, 2.94 for the season. And when I look at the plays that I had Jonah marked as a negative, like I was talking about, looking at the overall grade, it's just a lot of little stuff that needs to continue to be cleaned up. He only had 2 plays that I had him marked down with a full 0. One of those was a half slide that was away from him, so a pass play where he was blocking one-on-one. And then the other one was a long trap to the left side. So Cole Strange would have been pulling across, Jonah blocking down. Those were the 2 plays that I had him marked as a full negative. Everything else that I had was a 0.5. So those are ones that, he didn't lose completely, but there's still meat on the bone. There's still stuff that he can do better in that play. And that's kind of what we've seen over the last few weeks with him, is that we're eliminating those really bad plays that get highlighted on the broadcast. And now it's just little stuff that needs to continue to be cleaned up. And this is a graph that I've shared before, and I've talked about this before, that, when we look at a young player, we're going to expect some peaks and valleys in terms of their performances. But what I'm seeing with Jonah tracking this week from week is that, looking just at the peaks are on a upward arc here, or an upward trend. But you see the same thing with the valleys also. Like down here, weeks 2 and 3, I believe both those were a 0.00, right? And then we see those valleys kind of creeping up a little bit. And this game 13 grade was a little bit higher than the week 10 grade. So even though this is a poor performance overall, and a poor performance for Jonah as well, it's not as bad as what he's been earlier in the season. And, if you draw that line that goes directly up through there, you can see an overall trend in the upward direction. We also haven't seen him since weeks 2 and 3 have two really poor games in a row. So that's kind of nice heading into the Steelers and Bengals games here, that hopefully he bounces back and we can see, the pattern that he's had of 2 good games, 1 bad game, see that pop back up and get a couple of good performances from him coming up. Our next lowest grade of the week is going to be right tackle, Austin Jackson, coming in at a 4.93. And obviously lower than what he had last week, his first game that he was returning. Still, kind of fresh back into the lineup, so, not concerned by this at all. He's grading almost average. Like I said, 5.00 is average. Looking over his grades here, he was definitely hurt by the false start penalty that he had. Those get graded as a 0. He also had a duo to the right that he graded as a 0, and again, the rest of his were, just half point negatives. Struggled a little bit in the run game to the right side. He had that one duo play and then 2 outside zone plays where he didn't get full credit for. But overall, another solid performance from Austin Jackson. Had a couple of plays in the pass game where he was not great, and that's going to continue to be a thing. But the boost that he gives in the run game is, a lot of what you saw this week when you go from Larry Borom to Austin Jackson. You're going to get a lot more success off that right side of the offensive line. So, just exactly, I guess, what I would expect from week to week from Austin Jackson is, between that 5 and 7 grade is kind of where I see him consistently, right? He's going to be really good in the run game, probably going to be a little over aggressive on a couple of them, and he's going to struggle in pass protection. At this point in his career, he is what he is, and I just have bigger questions about his health than I do about what he's capable of doing on the field. Our next player in the grade, so we actually have 2 that are graded the same. We're going to go one at a time. And the first one is right guard Cole Strange. He graded a 6.43. So had a solid grade. And I'm not really going to go into the numbers again. But same thing I've said about him in previous weeks. He is very protected in the way that they are calling game plans. And nothing wrong with that, right? When you get 4 starters back in the lineup and you only have 1 reserve in there, you should be calling plays to mask that player. It's just, again, kind of a proceed with caution type deal looking at the grades that Cole Strange is getting, because he is being protected more than anybody else on the offensive line, including Jonah, in terms of what they're able to do. And like I said last week, I think if we had James Daniels in there at right guard, we'd see, these grades with Jonah and Cole Strange flipped. But he's been doing a solid job. Admiral was in the 3 yards per carry Discord this morning, and I made the comparison that he is essentially Liam Eichenberg, right? And you can take that however you want, but I've always said that Liam wasn't as bad as a lot of people thought, and I think that maybe some people saw that early this season with how bad the guard play could be. But this is a player that, if you are able to mask him, he can be serviceable for a short period, but this is always going to be somebody that you should be looking to upgrade whenever you can. And then, like I said, we have another player that is graded as 6.43, and that's going to be Aaron Brewer. And this was, not far off of his season average of a 7.01. Did some really good things in this game, and had a few plays that were kind of off. Only had one full zero, and that was on a duo to the right side, and several plays where he got half credit for. And something I talked about during the midseason review was that for whatever reason, Aaron Brewer seems to be better blocking outside zone to the right than he does to the left. And when I'm grading these games, like I don't go through and say, here's an outside zone to the left, right? How did Aaron Brewer do? I don't even look at the down and distance on most of them. I try to kind of isolate the play and grade the play individually without going through the game flow and all of that stuff. And when I'm looking at the grades for this week, of the ones that he had negative, half of those were on outside zone runs to the left. So it's really starting to feel like there is something there. The Dolphins ran more outside zone to the right this week than they did to the left. And, some may think that's because of Austin Jackson. I'm sure that's a part of it. But it just feels to me like Aaron Brewer being better blocking outside zone to the right compared to the left is really a thing. And that might be something I get into as we head into the offseason. But, no complaints with Aaron Brewer. Fantastic athlete. Love the way that he finishes plays. If you go back, you're going to find a few pancakes every week. This week was no exception. The Ollie Gordon touchdown, you're going to see him pushing the pile. You're going to see him doing things athletically that other teams wouldn't even dream of asking their centers to do. So another good week from Aaron Brewer. Again, keep in mind that if we had to change systems, might not be the same player, but given the system that we are in today, like we are getting an all-pro performance from Aaron Brewer, and hopefully it continues. And then before we get into the film review portion, we have one more player, and as you can tell, that's going to be left tackle Patrick Paul, coming in at 8.46, so a bump up from his season average of a 6.73. He'd have been over 9.0 if not for the false start penalty that he had. I had two other partially negative plays, and those were both outside zone plays to the right, so he'd have been trying to cut off from the backside of that. So just a good game overall. You know, similar to Brewer, a player that is playing at a Pro Bowl level, probably knocking on the door of an all-pro level performance. Probably not going to get that recognition this year, but we should all be very pleased with the progress of this second year left tackle for the Dolphins. So in summary here, now that you see all the grades, hopefully you can kind of understand why the overall grade, even though it's a good performance as a group, the overall grade, is not the highest they've had this season because, we didn't get Patrick Paul over 9. We didn't get Aaron Brewer over 8. We had Jonah down there at the 2.23, whereas last week everybody was close to average or better. So when you add all that together, you get a solid performance overall. Thankfully, there wasn't a lot of zero grades, not a lot of plays that were blown up due to bad blocking. But there was still room for improvement. Some of the stuff you go out and you watch what I posted on X there, a lot of those are one or two guys that maybe did okay, but if we could get them just a step further, then we're going to see some of these popping for 40, 50 yards. So again, good performance overall. And with all that out of the way, let's get into the film review portion. As we get into the film review here, first play we're going to look at. So this is going to be counter action. You're going to have Jonah pulling to the right. You're going to have Alec Ingold as the F coming through. Achan's going to give that little step to the side and then show the counter action. Two is going to roll out outside of that. And what I want you to pay attention to here as we look at this play, and again, what we're going to get here is that Jonah's going to pull to the right. Ingold's going to go to the right. We're going to get the fake there. But I want you to watch Aaron Brewer because he's going to do one of those things that most teams are not going to ask him to do. We're going to get down. We're going to get Paul in here trying to take care of that backside 4-eye. Brewer's going to start to work his way over there, just securing that. And once he has that, he is going to get out here to this wide 9 defensive end and block him out there. Right? We see Dulcich chipping him, and then we see Brewer working his way all the way to the edge. And this is just one of those things that you're not going to see most teams asking their centers to do. Usually it's going to be that Brewer would take that 4-eye, and then maybe Paul would step to the inside, kind of give a right hand in there, and then kick step out to that defensive end. But just having Brewer on the roster, some of the things that he opens up in terms of things that you can ask him to do is to get out here, get on this defensive end, and just make Tua more comfortable on that pass play. Next play we're going to look at here is the first touchdown. So this is going to be crack toss to the left. So we get Cedric Wilson blocking down. Doing a good enough job. We got Patrick Paul looping around. But the player I really want you to pay attention to here is left guard Jonah Savaiinaea. So watch the linebackers. We're going to get a little bit of help from the motion. But what we get from here is going to be that, right, this is a straight toss to the outside. We're going to get Cedric Wilson blocking down. Patrick Paul's getting outside. But now everybody's looking to cut something off. We're going to have a wide receiver coming in, taking care of him. Jonah is working up 241. Brewer is trying to cut off this 2-eye. We're going to have Strange trying to cut off. Austin Jackson trying to cut off. But I want you to watch Jonah because Sherwood here, number 44, he's a good linebacker, an athletic linebacker. And he's going to do a solid job flowing with this. But Jonah's doing a great job getting off the ball, maintaining leverage on that defensive tackle, allowing the Brewer should have been taking that over. He got a little wide on this. But Jonah does a great job getting that next level. You see Brewer settle down and eventually get there. But just the strain from Jonah to stay on that block, right? If he lets Sherwood go and doesn't chase back into this play, this is not a touchdown. But he does a great job. And you can also see Austin Jackson from the backside there, right? This time, watch Austin Jackson and watch how far across the formation he gets, right? He actually loops underneath, cuts that off, right? Getting these type of athletes in this scheme is just going to continue to open up what they can do in the run game. Next one here, I am just including because this is a concept they've been running, the fold concept, but this is the first time, well, this season, but since fold is new this year, the first time during the entire McDaniel era that they have used this in a play action sense. And what we get from this, again, this is not something new to them. They started running it to the left once Austin Jackson was back in the lineup, but essentially we're getting pin blocks from Jonah and Cole Strange. Patrick Paul is blocking out. We're getting Aaron Brewer, Austin Jackson. If this were the fold play, right, that's where we'd be going. Instead, we're getting play action to Dulcich on the backside of this. So nothing too crazy here, but just wanted to include it to show that they're building off of this. They started out only running this fold concept to the right side once Austin Jackson has returned to the lineup. Now they're running it to the left, and now we're seeing them take the next evolution of that and starting to use it in play action as well. And this is the way that good offenses are built. When you look at the Andy Reid, even the Kyle Shanahan offenses, they don't always start out with the crazy stuff. It's core concepts that you establish and you find out what you're good at, and then you slowly start adding wrinkles to that, whether it's play action passes, whether it's using different personnel like Miami did with their counter reverse earlier in the game. It's that type of stuff that you kind of build up your bank of plays that you can still go back to the core stuff at any point, but you're always adding something new to it for defenses to have to pay attention to. Next one here is going to be essentially an outside zone. So it's actually going to be a pass to Malik Washington on the little touch pass going forward. But the blocking scheme for this is going to be an outside zone to the right. And when I watched this initially, I had put blame on Cole Strange for it not being able to get up to that linebacker again. Number 44 always seems to be in the play somewhere. But when I went back and watched this, and I've talked about this before, is that one of the things that the Dolphins like to do is where this should normally, if we're going outside zone, right, we should be working a combo. Brewer should be going front side here and trying to work Cole Strange up to the linebacker. But the Dolphins, instead, they like to use what's called a through call. And when they do that, then they're just getting Cole Strange here, and we're asking Aaron Brewer to take that angle and cut off the linebacker. And many times, Aaron Brewer is athletic enough to do that, but when the defense does anticipate it, it's one of those deals that puts him in a tough scenario. So when we watch it here, you can see that Brewer is trying to climb immediately, but with that tackle slanting to the inside, now that angle is cut off, right? Strange thinks that he has that defensive tackle, and he's kind of late getting out there, but it's not really his fault because it should have been switched. That Strange was just getting up here on the defensive tackle, and that Brewer is getting that through call to the linebacker. Doesn't work out that way. And you could say that Strange is a little bit late adjusting, right? Maybe you'd like to see Malik Washington cut that up inside of Strange. That's a tough ask as well, when you're in a full sprint like this. So, lots of small places that you could assign the blame for. But the biggest thing for me, in my opinion, is that this was a variation of a combination block that kind of bit Miami in the butt. Whereas if they had gone with a traditional combination call on the front side on an outside zone, usually that's called a uno or ace call between the guard and the front side center. Had they comboed through that, we could see Brewer take over that three technique that's slanting to the inside, see Strange climb to that linebacker, and it's essentially a walk-in touchdown. But I think that they use these type of plays to mask Strange and not ask him to climb to the second level. And that's again not a bad thing when you have Aaron Brewer as your center and his ability to climb to the next level. But it does open up these type of scenarios where sometimes the play call can be the reason that it doesn't succeed. This one here is an outside zone to the left, and we're not going to dive too far into it, but I think we're going to have some outside zone right plays later that we're going to see a little bit of the difference of what I'm talking about. But watching Aaron Brewer here, outside zone to the left, he's got a one technique there, and we're going to see that he's not quite able to cut that off. And again, I don't really know the reasons behind that, but it does seem to be a thing here in 2025 for Aaron Brewer. Next one here, so similar to what we talked about with that fold concept earlier. This is a crack toss to the left. You're going to see that Malik Washington's going to block down. We're going to have Aaron Brewer along with Julian Hill, Dan Brunskill, all leading out to that left side. And then we're going to see Tua kind of reverse out there, almost a screen type pass. This was the first time that they have run a play action of any sort off of this crack toss, and it clearly looks ugly. I mean, this cornerback makes the play quickly, gets a little, dicey in terms of if he was able to jump that, then maybe we're looking at a pick six. But at the same time, I want you to look at how close this play is to popping for a big play. So we've got Aaron Brewer lining up the linebacker here. Austin Jackson is literally within a yard of being able to make the block on this cornerback. So, right, if this cornerback sits back a little more, or maybe if Malik Washington attacks that a little more, look at the alley that is there with only one defender capable of making that play. So this one did not work out, but I would like to see this be something that Miami tries to come back to because, especially with Austin Jackson, right? If we can leak him out there, have him run through a corner and be able to get somebody like, Malik Washington, make this a Devon Achane, make it a Jalen Waddle. Can do this with a lot of different players, but if we can just get that cornerback, this is going to pop for a big play one of these weeks. Here we're going back to crack toss to the left again, and and this is common across the NFL, just how close these plays are to being big time plays. And on this one, if you watch Jalen Waddle coming in from the right side of your screen, I don't know if he gets stepped on or what, but you can see him pulling up as he's blocking number 44, who's in the play again. But if Waddle's able to stay on that just a little bit longer, right, we are getting Jalen right into that second level. Another thing to look at here, just a couple of other small things. One, again, we're getting that through call from Aaron Brewer that seems to kind of put him in a bad position again. So he is going to be comboing to his left side, right? We're cracking number 9. We are bringing in, cracking number 9 with Julian Hill. We're bringing in Jalen Waddle for 44. So this should be a combo between Brewer and Savaiinaea up to 56. But we see Brewer trying to go with that through call again and get stuck chasing from the backside. Now he kind of takes himself out of the play in a sense, but he does get Alec Ingold to slow down and help out. So another scenario that as we move forward, right, maybe we need to start trusting these guards a little more and letting them try to get these on more traditional combination blocks. Last thing I want you to look at here, Austin Jackson from the backside. Just love the way that he is able to get into the open field and run, working through trash here. So he is going to work past number 78 there, working up to cut off number 7 or 27. So, as we look at some of these big plays that hopefully will pop later in the season, when we're going to the left side, right, really keep an eye out for Austin Jackson making his way over from the backside and getting those touchdown ceiling blocks. So, next one here. So, we talked before about just taking basic concepts and using different personnel, different formations, right? Different stuff like that. So this is your basic counterplay, right? And some sites will just call this pull kick, which means you have somebody pulling, you have somebody, or pull lead, I'm sorry, you have somebody pulling to kick out the end man on the line of scrimmage. You have somebody kicking. And that's exactly what we're going to get here. And this, like I said, this formation here, a little bit wild. You got Darren Waller all the way back here. You got Jalen Wright offset. You got Dan Brunskill lined up as kind of a sniffer position. So this gives the illusion of complexity, and that's something that Anthony Weaver mentioned earlier this year. But the offense is doing the same thing because all that we're doing here is that we're blocking down, right? We're sealing here. It's actually going to be Aaron Brewer. Your athletic center is going to be the one that's pulling the kick. You're going to have Dan Brunskill leading up to number 56. And then Waller is just eye candy out there. So, again, this is just a basic. I mean, it's a little more complex than what other teams will do because it's usually your backside guard that's pulling on your counter plays. The Dolphins are using the center on this. But it's really a simple concept that they are running, a simple gap concept they're running, but you get a funky looking formation. You get Darren Waller, who carried the ball earlier in the game, as your deep back there, and it just gives the defense something else they have to consider, right? And this is, something that obviously they didn't give it to Waller here, but now as the Steelers are looking at this, now they have to make sure they have somebody covering that player. And you don't even have to have, maybe it's not Waller in that position next week or 3 weeks when they run this same idea, right? Maybe it's Achane that's back there, and you have Wright running the counter, and then you're throwing it to Achane just on a little swing pass out there. So this is just another one of those examples of the illusion of complexity, but it's really just a basic concept that they've been running all year. And then just a couple of quick outside zone right plays, and mainly I shared these, and I shared them on X also, is just because of how cleanly these are hitting, right? If you look at the way that this lines up, the blocking is fairly straightforward here because we're just going to have it's a numbers game, right? So you have your fullback coming across, and your fullback's going to be accountable for the first linebacker, which means that you got a solo block out there, which means that now we're comboing through here, up there, right? We're comboing here, up there, and just very, very simple. But the play just hits very cleanly. Enjoyed it overall. But one of the things that we talked about earlier in this video was the difference of Aaron Brewer going to his right versus his left. And he is aided here a little bit by that 2-eye or one technique, whatever you want to call him there. But you can just see that Brewer is winning immediately going to the right, which he didn't necessarily do going to the left. So like I said, I don't want to get too far into it in the middle of the season, but just feels like it is one of those things that there's something there that Brewer is better blocking outside zone to his right than he is to his left. And then this is not the same play, but it's going to look very similar. You get a very similar alignment. And it hits again. And this is, when you're running the ball well and you're beating up on a team, right? Just keep going back to the things that are working. And that's exactly what they did here. Again, Aaron Brewer with that 2-eye, able to win right away, unlike he was going to the left side. Nice job by Jonah here getting to that next level. But when you watch outside zone, when the blocks are hitting the way they're supposed to, it's a thing of beauty here, and the Dolphins did a great job with it. I think I had them charted a total of 21 times running traditional outside zone, and that didn't count in the crack tosses that they ran or the fold concepts that are an offshoot of the outside zone stuff. So Miami was running outside zone very well throughout the game, and in this, essentially the final drive for the starters, they just kept running it over and over again with a ton of success. And then last play for the film review, this is going to be the Ollie Gordon touchdown. And so concept-wise, this is going to be duo to the right, but you can see it ends up bouncing back to the left. But the reason I wanted to include it is just watch all the linemen at the end of this play. Like, you can just see how much they are enjoying playing this style of football, right? They're off the ball, they're running, right? We get tied up a little bit there. We get Patrick Paul's in there, Brewer's diving in there, Jonah's coming in late. Like, the whole group is just helping Ollie finish over the line. So, you can see it. This is a group that really enjoys being able to run the ball, and hopefully it's able to be something they continue to do as we move into the later part of this season. All right, so as we wind down this video, hopefully between the grades and the film review, you can see a lot of what I have been saying over the season kind of coming to fruition here, that, getting these starters back for the most part is really, and, the continuity they've had on the offensive line is starting to have those benefits up front. We're starting to see not just the chemistry of the offensive line, but also the way that can affect the play calling with the way that Mike McDaniel can start to build these, build out from the concepts they have. Hopefully it's something that continues as we go forward. Obviously the Jets were not a very good team, and neither were the Saints. We're going to get into some better opponents coming up, and hopefully they continue to, probably not going to find the same level of success, but hopefully they can still find enough success they can lean on this running game and continue this winning streak. So, as always, I appreciate you guys watching. Leave a comment below here. If you're not following me on X, come find me at OL Coach Smith 63. Do a lot of sharing, a lot of interactions on there. And as always, appreciate you guys watching, and we will talk again soon.
Okay, thank you. Chase, and back over to Achane again. Believe he's got a first down.
Make up for a lot of mistakes.
1st and 10 after an 11-yard pass play to Achane.